or what was the discourse like back then? Were there, I know there were people who called Roosevelt a class traitor, similar, I don't know if their rhetoric got as inflamed as what President Obama's hearing, but I mean, how did that happen and how did he deal with that?
Well, it was, I think, pretty inflamed back then. You know, if you look back, you look at some of even the cartoons. You know, you could get a sense of it. And there's some real other, you know, demagogues out there that were really trying to that were stirring things up. But FDR and Obama have said two very similar things. Essentially, they've said, "Make me do it." And what FDR did is he enabled it by passing legislation, for example, that enabled people to organize, you know,
Right.
labor unions. So that was a tremendous way to push the president, people coming together and organizing, you know, around issues of labor. I see the Employee Free Choice Act in the same vein. I mean, labor has been beaten down, and that's one area that people can organize in. And the issue is that obviously this president is very capable of doing the right thing. He's shown us that. But we've got to supply the pressure on him to make him do what he's capable of doing. I forgot, the first question you had was on?
Just the reaction and how, you know, whether that was it as pitched as some of the stuff we're hearing now?
Oh, I think so. You know, and there's a lot of revisionism. When I was in Washington, we met with a couple of administration officials, you know, and one of them was very interested in the organization I work, you know, developing some counter arguments to what the right has come up with, which some of them are obviously pretty ridiculous, but again, you know, if you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, people start to believe it. I work with a couple of organizations. One is the local one, and basically what we're trying to do is to map the physical legacy of California, which is massive. But, you know, in every state, you know, it was massive. But it does help counter the argument that the New Deal didn't do anything. It did a lot, and as I said, we're so dependent on it. The other organization is a national organization that links people and organizations doing New Deal work all over the country. And obviously, you know, in the last several months, there have been a lot of calls for us to speak in a lot of places because there is this renewed interest. But I think I tried to kind of draw together the lessons of the New Deal and what I said, and I think in essence, it was big. You know, it was big government, but it was big government for most of us. And I think we have to, it's inspiring, I'm steeped in it, but it's continually inspiring to me because I realize how much was accomplished. And I encourage people to investigate and look at the websites that we have and the links to other places because you will likewise be not only inspired but hopefully empowered by that knowledge of what was accomplished. And we have a long way to go, you know, in terms of getting back to that. We have a lot of catching up to do. I mean, that gap in wages that I spoke of, it obviously is part of the problem that we've got, and so we have a lot of ground to make up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there other questions before we move on?
Thanks, Harvey. I'd like to ask you if you have any comment about. You mentioned the need for massive policy change and legislation from the top down. And you also mentioned the need for organization from the grassroots. And obviously we're in a somewhat different situation now than what we were in during that period of time. But someone over here said, we always need an emergency to respond to. And I'm wondering if you have some insight, because what we need to do is not only provide legislation or encourage legislation, which this body will hope to make recommendations about, but we also want to empower and elicit that organization and that public participation, that real sense of this is my country, this is my town, this is my community. And how did they do it then, and how can we adapt that to now?
Well, I think there were enormous pressures. There was the economic pressure, and again, there was no safety net, so that created a greater sense of urgency. But then there was also the parallel environmental pressures and people felt that they were displaced by it. And I think increasingly, we're aware of it. I mean, if you just looked at the fires, the 3 major fires in Santa Barbara, in just I guess a matter of months. So the kind of environmental pressures obviously is going to put in front of people a great sense of urgency about what we have to do. But again, what they did is that people got together and they organized. They put pressure on elected officials, and I think that's what we have to do again. Is do whatever we can in whatever way works for us to pressure the elected officials to do what needs to be done, and then gain an understanding of the scope. Because a lot of times, I mean, if I look, for example, at the president's education policy, having been an educator, it seems a bit short-sighted. He's focusing just on education. And I think obviously, I work with kids that you could have the best school, but if they're coming out of a community that's totally economically depressed with all the problems, how are you going to bring those kids up ultimately? All of them. I mean, I'm just not talking about the few. What Jonathan Kozol, I guess, refers to as sort of something like enlightened segregation. But the other big problem we have in this state is the prison system. This huge prison system and I want San Quentin to remain where it is. I don't want any developers to get their hands on it because I want it to be in front of us for a long time until we deal with prison reform in this state.
I'm Frank Ager from Fairfax, and a former mayor. Spent 40 years at the town council in Fairfax, and former Teamster Union president and delegate to North Bay Labor Council. So I've been involved in governmental, environmental, and labor issues for an awfully long time. I sit on 3 nonprofit boards: Stop the Spray Marin, Pesticide Free Zone, and the North Coast Rivers Alliance. And we're involved in quite a bit of litigation over the use of pesticides, the loss of our salmon, and the destruction of our river systems. What I see is an opportunity here. The president said he wants change, and by golly, we have the opportunity to really lead the way, to show what kind of change can occur. And if we can't accomplish that in Marin and Sonoma counties, there's no other counties in the state of California that can. The 58 counties, Marin and Sonoma are, in fact, I believe, the greenest and the most socially conscious counties in the state. So, I urge you to be bold in your actions, be bold in your thinking. Specific proposals, 4 minutes, I'm not going to give you a lot of specific proposals, but I hope to participate as you go through this process and be able to answer questions about the kinds of issues that we've faced for years and years and years here. When I was a kid growing up in the Russian River, there were no dams on the Russian River. Today we've got Coyote Dam at Lake Mendocino, Warm Springs Dam at Lake Sonoma, and the dams were there supposedly just to save the fish and stop flooding in the Russian River. Well, the highest floods Russian River has ever seen is after both dams were built. The salmons are in massive decline. We've lost our salmon seasons. Pesticides are just all over the state, and when you try to address pesticide issues, there's the corporate ag and the pesticide industry, chemical industry, and the Farm Bureau just beat us down. They said, my gosh, we're growing food for everyone here. Well, we want safe food, and we can lead the way here in Sonoma County, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Frank.